And roll call.
Sure. Graham Williams.
Here.
Gary Camp.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Paul Cervantes.
Here.
Jared Murtis.
Present.
Mike Wanzer. I see him on. Ronald Brister.
Here.
And Jose Jimenez.
Here.
Quorum established. Give me a minute just to share the agenda here. Let me see, which one do I have open? Give me just a minute. There it is. Okay, here's the agenda. We have no public comment right now.
Okay. I'm going to open public comment. If there's nobody, I'm going to close public comment. There's no approval absences. I'm going to open up item number 4, approval of minutes.
Has everyone gotten a chance to review the minutes? If so, I need a first and a second for approval.
Mike Wanzer, I make a motion, we approve the minutes as written.
Gary Camp, I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Number appeals. I'm going to open up this item.
Let me know if y'all can see that staff report on the screen.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great.
That's it.
Okay.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I am Kathleen Chapa, the new Floodplain and Coastal Protection Manager for Corpus Christi. Hope everybody's having a great day. For the appeals, we have 4 coming before the board today. I do want to give a little bit of information before we get started. As of today, or this past year, we've had 254 permits reviewed for flood. This past year, 10 commercial, 244 were residential. That includes 3 of the non-compliance today. One of them we're going to hear has not been presented for a building permit as of yet. The first one we are going to look at today is for 15302 East Chesapeake. It's a single-family residence. It has had its final building inspection as of 4/14/21. At permit submittal, Clint Tucker Homes presented a pre-construction elevation certificate that met code compliance. But upon a final inspections, the new owner or constructor, Newcastle Construction, presented the final elevation certificate. And based on that, the indicated finished floor and garage were non-compliant to the city adopted freeboard requirement, which was adopted April 16th of 2019. The finished floor does, however, meet FEMA's minimum standard for at or above base flood elevation, and the garage can come into compliance with installation of flood vents. For the form on there, you can see pre-construction was set to be at 12.5. Post is sitting at 11.7. Staff recommends disapproval because we have adopted that 1-foot freeboard requirement. Attached, you will see their application and the pre and post construction elevation certificates. And I do believe we have representatives online to discuss that today.
Mike Wanzer, I'll make a motion that we accept the staff's recommendation and deny the variance.
Demolish and read.
I believe we have to open the public hearing first.
Oh, okay. I thought we did. I'm sorry.
Hi, my name is Christina Fertilla. I'm the owner of this home. And I'm sorry if I'm not following the formal protocol. From what I understood, I've never attended one of these meetings, that I would have the opportunity to speak on this. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then John Pope, who is the builder who I contracted to finish out the home, I believe is also on here too. So if he happens to want to add anything. This is a very extenuating circumstance. We purchased this home. I'm sorry, we have had a contract under this home when it was in the framing stage with Clint Tucker Homes. And due to just some differences of how things should be done, we decided to part ways with Clint Tucker and complete the home on our own. It was probably 97% completed when when he stepped away, and I then contracted out Newcastle Homes. It was a pretty ugly breakup with Clint Tucker Homes. As part of our settlement of moving away from one another and going our separate ways, he was supposed to inform us of any information that could play a role in the I guess getting certificates and approvals from any inspections. We were not made aware that the foundation was not at the right elevation. We were told everything was good to go. And then we did everything that we needed to do for a final. And then we obviously have been held up with this circumstance now. As part of the recommendation, we were asked to put in flood, I'm sorry, I forgot the terminology for them, flood vents, I believe. And we have installed those. And then we've done everything that we possibly can do within our power at this point. I think it's important to note the human element of this, being that my husband and I basically, like, we weren't able to purchase the home because it wasn't complete. We couldn't get financing for it, so we had to purchase the home cash. We cleaned out basically all of our bank accounts in order to make this happen, with the hope and understanding that as soon as we completed the house, we'd be able to finance it. Have it then financed. This situation has put us in a horrible situation where basically we haven't been able to have financing done. We weren't able to get certificate of occupancy, and it's just ballooned to this very difficult position where we truly are the victims of a contractor who was negligent. And we did all the due diligence we could possibly do to understand what's going on. And in all honesty, we were just kind of, we weren't lied to, we just weren't told the whole story. And so it is my hope and prayer that the committee will accept the flood vents and the modifications that we have made in order to make this compliant, and that a certificate of occupancy will be granted.
Thank you.
Mike Wanzer asking, do the flood vents just cover the garage? Will bring it into compliance, or remedies it, the garage only, correct?
It only remedies the garage at this time.
Okay.
So I'm gonna go ahead and close the public comment and open up discussions with the board towards the applicant.
Well, if now is the time, Mike Wanzer, I make a motion that we follow the staff's recommendation and deny the.
Is anyone
permit.
talking? Am I missing something?
Yes,
Yeah.
somebody's talking, and to be honest, I think that I should have the opportunity to speak as well before y'all go into comment. I mean, into discussion.
Okay, I'm gonna reopen. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
This
Yes,
is
sir.
Ramon. Yes, I'm gonna reopen up the public comment. And this time, if the contractor, the new contractor wants to speak, he can speak.
Okay, thank you guys. Yes, sir. I'm John Pope, Newcastle Homes. What all that Christina told you is true. So basically, I took over the project at 97% completion, or basically we just needed to finish it up, get our certificates of occupancy, and of course, elevation certificates and all that. We did all that. Obviously, the house was above the federal flood zone, the federal mandated flood zone, but we're not above the city adopted 1 foot rule that Greg Smith has pushed so hardly on. I understand that the builder that did this built another house just right across the street and was granted a variance, was given that he did not install flood vents, is my understanding. So, I mean, I thought we were kind of going above and beyond by already having installed flood vents and, doing all that we could to raise the house. I mean, if you denied the ability to obtain a certificate of occupancy, what then? Does that mean that we just have to tear down a house and it's rendered, unlivable and rebuild it? I just feel like that's a little extreme. And I think that some grace should be given, especially under the circumstances that this exact same builder built one at the exact same time, right across the street, and was granted a variance. So I'm just surprised to hear that the first comment from this committee was that we deny it. That's just kind of unfathomable.
Mike Wanzer here. It's not the committee speaking. It's me speaking as a member of the committee. So it's not the whole committee speaking.
Okay.
And,
may I ask why it is that you would say that? Why that is your opinion?
Sure, you can ask, and I'd be glad to explain. Is because
Mike, you have to wait for this.
Oh,
you have to wait for. Yeah, let's just wait. Let's
he
follow
asked me a
protocol.
question. He asked me a question.
He is, but we need to wait until he's done with all his conversations, and then we can close
Okay.
and speak as a group.
Very good.
Okay. Yep. Anything else, John?
No, I'm done.
Okay. All right. I'm going to go ahead and close public comment and open the discussion to the board members. So here you guys can bring up questions towards the owner, or you can bring a question towards the building committee, which would be ourselves, or towards Luke Fry or to Kathleen. So if you guys got questions or comments, you guys can speak on as a general group.
Rand, this is Paul with Paul Cervantes. I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Pope, I guess brought up the point that I guess the same builder built 2 houses, and we did approve one prior. Is that correct?
So the answer is yes. And I did a little digging overall on the concept of what happened last time and stipulations. So essentially what he did, he was working on these 2 homes at the same time. And, it appears what we discussed with the group is last time, we're considering giving an applicant an opportunity by, if it's a contractor, if it's his first time, something happened, if they're close to the floodplain, it had the flood page changed, was it built prior to the adoption of the freeboard? And so, yeah, on the last one, we considered it in the sense that it was done after the adoption of the freeboard, and it was his first mistake. So the answer is that's what happened last time, and it sounds like he built these at the same time.
Correct. And then Mr. Pope has gone, I guess, a little bit more further by putting the vents versus Mr. Tucker the last time, which he didn't do any vents. Is that correct also?
That's correct. And there was a comment made during the discussion that the city adopted it and Greg Smith pushed for it. So that's taken out of context. So the building code itself requires a 1 foot freeboard already. So all we did was make the city ordinance match up with the building code, and that's all we did.
But I guess my follow-up question is, this new builder, I guess he's gone a little bit further versus what Mr. Tucker did when we approved his house the first time, correct?
Right. Now, has he done above and beyond what we requested the first time? The answer is yes, he has.
Okay.
Correct.
Well, Mike Wanzer speaking, above and beyond, it's still not compliant. And we keep rubber stamping these. It's not going to stop. We should deny this, and they can go before the full city council and let the city council be responsible for waiving these things, not us as a group, because this is not going to stop.
This is Paul Cervantes, Ram. I disagree on this one. My thing is, I'm a homeowner. The homeowner told us her situation, so I totally disagree with Mike on that one. My thing is, we approved one. Why can we approve this one? In my opinion.
Well, I mean, you're correct.
Hey, Paul, but where do we stop? We're not going to stop. We're going to approve the next one and the next one with 5 on it, and then the next one. So why don't we just work on saying, forget it, scrap the whole idea. Don't waste our time. Because I don't understand why we want to be part of a board that's just rubber stamping something that's not compliant.
Mike,
Where is the professional responsibility of the builder? And
Okay,
if you look on the variances, purely for financial reasons is not one of the reasons that we should grant them. I mean, they're raising houses all over.
But to go back to what you're saying, that we should have not approved the first house.
I agree, and I've disagreed with every one of them. Every one of them. And we shouldn't have approved it. If they want to get a variance, let them go to the city council.
Well,
because that way that exposes how this is not working.
Well, that's perfect. Thank you, guys. So the board is set up as an opportunity to get, resolved prior to going to city council. That's what the board set up for. The board is set up to help interpret the building code and the development code. And if somebody does have an issue with our, recommendation, they can appeal it to city council. That is correct. Now, as a group,
responsibilities as board members is to make sure that the codes are complied with.
Right. Correct.
And we're not doing that. And where does this put all the people that have done it right? The other 251 people or permits that have done it right. Where does it put those people? It puts them at a disadvantage. It's not fair. Home builders have insurance. It's called professional responsibility. Let them do it.
So
they're raising houses all over Houston. They could raise that house 6 inches.
So you said professional insurance.
No, I said professional responsibility.
Oh, okay. They don't have to. So that's a big issue right there.
I think the thing is this is not the place for the homeowner or the builder to address it. If they're not happy, they could address it with the city council or in court. It's a civil matter.
So we can always have 2 motions on the floor.
Mr. Munoz, this is Jared Murtis, and I have a question for either Luke Fry or you, either or, that may have a bearing upon this. I did some reading after the last variance request about the authority of the board, and I would like to read something to you and see what the interpretation is of the official and the board president. So the codes that we're discussing are the adopted code by we're talking about the IBC code family, right? So the National Building Code, mechanical codes, plumbing codes, the whole family, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Every one of the codes has a section called Board of Appeals. And every single code, the authority, which is the building official or official authority, there's different words that they use for it, basically interprets the code. And if there is a question about that interpretation by an interested party, then the City of Corpus Christi has the authority to create a Board of Appeals. And the Board of Appeals, which is allowed by each code, is different. The building code has a Board of Appeals requirement. The energy code has a different appeals requirement. electrical mechanical code, plumbing code, and so on and so forth. And in there is a limitation of authority. And I'm going to read it to you. On the International Building Code 2015, Section 113, Board of Appeals, Item A, 113.2, limitation of authority for the Board of Appeals. An application for appeal shall be based on a claim that the true intent of this code or the rules legally adopted thereunder have been incorrectly interpreted. The provisions of this code do not fully apply, or an equally good or better form of construction is proposed. So it's better than code. The board shall not have authority to waive requirements of the code. And if you read those code requirements in the administrative section of every single code within the IBC code family, read similarly as the limitations of the authority of the Board of Appeals. And each code has a specific requirement for the membership and the qualifications of each member of the board as it relates to the discipline in question. So if this is me being ignorant, not understanding, I'm not an attorney, but if the code does not give the Board of Appeals the authority to be lesser than a code requirement, and it has to be in excess thereof, then if there's no question of the interpretation and it's lesser than code, I don't know if this board has the authority in this circumstances. So I just did some reading about that, and it's really more to the legal department for City of Corpus Christi, and people that have adopted the code, and maybe there's other legal requirements that allow the board to be lesser than code requirements.
Okay, Jared, Buck Bryce, City Legal here. I'll go ahead and address that.
Okay.
So the Corpus Christi Flood Code addresses the procedure for variances, and so the Flood Code Section 14-544 is what authorizes the Construction Trade Advisory and Appeals Board to hear and render judgments in variance cases. And so the standard to grant a variance under the code, there's three standards that have to be found by the board. The first one is showing a good and sufficient cause. Two is a determination that failure to grant the variance would result in exceptional hardship to the applicant. And then the last element is a determination that the granting of a variance will not result in increased flood heights, additional threats to public safety, extraordinary public expense, create a nuisance, cause fraud on or victimization of the public, or conflict with existing local laws or ordinances. So that is the standard for granting a variance under the code.
When you're saying under the code, because each code section has a different Board of Appeals requirement. So when you say the code, are we talking about specifically the way that the flood component has been adopted?
Correct.
Okay, because I just wanted to make that clear, because the other thing about this board is it has broad representation. So when we are having a conversation about a particular variance request, the applicable code is very important, and understanding that there are differences. The board has different authorities depending on the subject nature brought upon the board. So from a legal perspective, you're saying that the way that we've adopted the flood requirement, that the board does have the authority to be lesser than a city adopted requirement.
Yes, if they make those three findings that I just listed.
Right.
Then my next question was to Ram. Ram, the Ronald Voss had done the elevation certificates for this project. So in the way that that works with the licensed professional doing the elevation certificate, is there anything that you see from your professional opinion that Ronald Voss did not do correctly, or do you feel that his work is correct and the way that the process was followed was everyone did the best they could with what they had?
So the answer is I would always look at these certificates, right?
Right.
And the problem is it just gives you general information. Somebody was calling me at the same time. I mean, could it have been done better? I don't think so. I think this would have fallen back on the general contractor in the sense for him to verify that he was in compliance with it. I think for this to work better, the city has to implement some type of certification right before the concrete is placed to ensure we don't run into this again. The answer is yes. Something needs to be done on the city's behalf to require a stop on the project until this, objective is met, that the foundation is at the correct height so they can't pour. So we need to add something here on the city's behalf. And we keep saying it every meeting. We need some type of certification that the forms before the concrete place are at the correct height. And I think we've called it out, every time at every meeting? Does that seem about right, Jared?
Yes.
Gary Camp, we for sure called it out last time, but I'm the one that brought it up.
So, I mean, here again, we're going to bring it up here after we close this one item up. And we'll remind the whole city again that we need some type of milestone to prevent this.
Ram, one of the concerns we had, and anyone can go back and listen to the recording of the last meeting, but when you allow a variance that is below a city standard, the message that's sent is that, well, what about me? And unfortunately today, we're hearing that from the public. Mr. Pope basically says, hey, you gave it to him, so I expect you to give it to me. And in a sense, I didn't think it was going to be a problem because y'all are lenient. And
in all honesty, I know I'm speaking out of turn, but I think you should know that Mr. Clint Tucker, we contacted him after we found out about this, and he literally mocked this committee. And so to me, the big problem is these contractors. I'm not a contractor. I hired out someone who I thought was a professional who proved to not be that. But the contractors are not being held responsible. Why Clint Tucker didn't get a fine for 2 homes having an inappropriate foundation is beyond me. And why he's still out in our community building 5 or 6 homes at this very moment is frightening to me as a consumer.
So we appreciate that comment. We
I'd
have
like
some
to make
other
a
things.
comment. This is Mike Wanzer on that comment, is that for the same reason that you don't understand why he's still doing that, is I don't understand why you don't have him in court instead of in front of us. Why you're not taking civil action against him instead of turning to the citizens of the community for relief.
Well, have you ever gone to court? Do you have $100,000? I don't have $100,000 extra to take him to court, in all honesty.
So
I'm trying to make it by. I'm trying to deal with what I have. And I don't have the financial means to be able to take that man to court. And if you've had any type of legal action, you can have empathy and understand that sometimes you financially just can't float things like that. And I cannot.
we understand your predicament. Thank you. So
I'm empathetic, but it doesn't change the fact that it's not in compliance.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you. So, I mean, like I said, if anybody else has got any pertinent information you want to bring up, this is the moment.
Well, based on what legal told us a minute, this is Gary Camp, by the way, based on what legal told us a minute ago, this home meets the 3 requirements and does present an undue hardship. And I think the real problem is Tucker, and we probably need to take some kind of action to revoke a license or do something on that guy.
What license does the builder have, Gary?
So, Mr. Mike, last time we did this, we can move
Wait,
on
wait, Ram,
to.
Ram,
Well,
Ram.
I'm gonna answer that.
I had
first.
a question for Mr. Camp. What kind of license does a builder have?
None.
Okay, well, how are we going to revoke his license?
So this is where I was leading up. So what we can do is, as we get further along on this meeting, we can set up agenda items where we request that the city development staff set up a case against him to go ahead and work on a debarment.
I agree with Ram. This is Paul.
So I mean, we have opportunities here to resolve some of these circumstances with repeat contractors who are failing to meet the code and putting the public at undue risk and financial burdens and hardships. So us as the board, we have to follow the procedure. Is go through development services, request a case to be opened, and work the debarment process. But we have to follow the order.
Thank you, Ram.
Yes, sir. So at this time,
Because I'm not sure to give a buck on that.
right, we can talk about that after once we open up those items. But right now we're still on this item. Do we have any motions? Mike made a motion earlier. Do we have
Yep.
another motion?
Paul Cervantes makes a motion to approve.
All right, we have two motions. I'm going to go ahead and ask for a roll call.
Recommendation?
Okay, we're gonna take the first motion first. Is there even a second to Mike's first motion?
I'll second Jose Jimenez.
Okay, so Mike made a motion to deny. And who's making the second?
Jose Jimenez.
Jose, okay. And then we'll do a roll call vote on that. So, this is a motion to deny if you're, vote no if you don't agree. So Ram Munoz,
No.
Gary Camp,
No,
Paul Cervantes,
No.
Jared Murtis,
No.
Mike Wanzer,
Yes.
Ronald Brister,
No.
and Jose Jimenez.
Yes.
Okay, motion does not pass. So who made the second motion? And what was it for?
Paul Cervantes to approve.
Is there a second?
this is Gary Camp, I'll second.
Okay, we'll do a roll call. Vote no if you don't agree. Ram Munoz,
I agree. Yes.
Gary Camp,
I agree.
Paul Cervantes,
I agree.
Jared Murtis,
I agree.
Mike Wanzer,
No.
Ronald Brister,
Yes.
and Jose Jimenez.
No.
Motion passes to approve.
Thank you very much for your approval.
Yes, ma'am.
And
we're gonna-
if you do choose to open a case against Clint Tucker, please feel free to reach out to me. I'll be happy to give a statement and lots of information because it's a big public concern what he's doing.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, if you feel like you want to open civil litigation, you're more than welcome to use our findings here.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the second appeal. I'm gonna go ahead
Okay,
and
give
open
me
it
a
up.
moment to bring it up, please. Just a moment.
No problem.
Okay, let me know if you see it.
It's on there. We can see it.
Okay, great.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. For the second appeal, we are looking at 15314 and 15316 Cruiser. It is a townhome located at Padre Island number 4, lot 4, block 215. At pre-submittal, Texas Home Contractors presented a pre-construction elevation certificate and indicated code compliance. Under final inspections, which were completed 4/13 of 21 for both addresses and were approved. It indicated that the finished floor was below the city adopted freeboard requirement. 15314 is sitting at 10.5, required pre-construction is 11. 15316 Cruiser is at 10.5, pre-construction at 11. Staff recommendation is disapproval for the variance for the city adopted 1-foot freeboard. Attached, you're going to see the variance request application, the elevation certificates, which includes the grades. And I believe we have the representatives online to discuss it.
Yes, we're here.
I'm gonna go ahead and open public comment.
Yes, sir.
Can you please state your name?
Heriberto Cisneros.
Marisa Cisneros.
Okay, thank you.
Do you guys have any comments to make?
Well, I'm the homeowner of this townhomes on the island, and the property is already, we closed before got the CFO. And when we tried to get my last inspection, we find out we're like 5-7 inches. I can't remember, and I can't hear what she said. We're below the elevation certificate from the beginning. It was something, I mean, we not really know about it. When we poured the concrete, everything was okay from my concrete guy, but I mean, honestly, we don't know much about benchmarks and all that. Now I found out with Bristol's with the engineering, and in this case, I mean, we found out at the end. So unfortunately, I mean, really, we don't know what to do except for the garage bins on the door. I don't know if you suggest something else to do. My clients, I mean, they're already like ready to move in and everything a month ago. So we really need your help and to tell us if we can do something about it.
Now, okay. I'm gonna go ahead and close public comment. I'm gonna open it up to the board to discuss.
Okay.
Ram, this is Jared Murtis. Who is the general contractor on this project?
The way it sounds, and if he wants to come and talk, it seems like we are talking to the general contractor right now.
Okay.
Hey, Ram, this is Michael York. I couldn't get my phone unmuted fast enough, but I'm calling in for a different appeal hearing, but I just couldn't help but notice that and thought it might be helpful. That certificate you had up, it said that the datum they used on their certificate was NAD 27 or NGVD 27, but what I wanted to point out is the BFEs, the effective map is based on that 27 datum, but the preliminary is not. So if you got 6-inch difference, you know, that requirement of 11 feet may actually be 10.5 when you do that datum change. But just thought that might be worth pointing out.
I concur. At this time, the certificate that's completed has it listed as they should have converted it already at that point. But luckily enough, I'll be able to ask one of the board members here in a little bit. So thank you, Mike. Do you have any other comments or questions from the board? You there, Ronald?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. I believe you may have to abstain on this one
Okay,
if you were part of the elevation certificate.
not a problem.
But while we have you here, can you verify that you guys did convert the datum?
Well, what we have to do is we have to show the datum that is in place. We can do that in the comments, and sometimes we're requested, but I have to show the datum that is in effect.
Gotcha. So you guys did make the adjustments to get it back into the right datum on here.
Correct.
Perfect. That's what I suspected.
Ram, this is Gary Camp. Would you explain that in layman's terms?
Actually, Ronald is way better at it because he does this every day. I don't do it every day, but it requires you to go ahead and set up an unknown location and run your conversion.
Del city, yo creo.
What the elevation certificate provides is what datum is in effect today, not the future preliminary maps. Sometimes we've had clients ask us to include that on the bottom because in our comments we will put that there is a preliminary BFE, and if that applies, that they want to know what converted that is. But on the actual certificate and numbers that are on C2, in this case, we have to put what is in effect today, the datum that is in effect today, and not the future maps.
Okay.
This Gary again, relating to this location, what's the preliminaries going to do to this?
Gonna make it go up.
It's gonna make the BFE go up.
Yeah, but the good thing is they went ahead and established the higher BFE requirement from the get-go. So they're going to be shy 6 inches of freeboard, I guess, if when the new maps get adopted.
When the new maps come in effective, they will still be 6 inches above the federally required BFE, base flood elevation.
6 inches below our 1 foot freeboard.
6 inches above. Their base floor, their finished floor will be 6 inches above their base flood elevation.
You said it right, Gary. They're going to be 6 inches above the floodplain, but 6 inches below the 1 foot freeboard. Same.
Okay, I understand.
Yeah.
Ram, this is Jared Murtis, and I was going to ask the board on a residential versus commercial construction. I have never had a commercial contractor on a project I've ever worked on tell me that it's a concrete subs problem, and every general contractor I've ever met knew they were responsible for their project. So is that something normal in the residential world where general contractors are not responsible for their subs, or how does that work? Because I'm a little bit confused and I don't understand that.
So it's not uncommon for I hate to say it like this. I know we're getting off topic, but to manage themselves sometimes. Some of the subs manage themselves while they're on site, rather than be managed by the general, which residential construction is a lot more different than when it comes to commercial construction. And you are right. I don't think we've seen a commercial construction appeal other than below a flood, but like a staircase for a velocity zone or some type of containment structure in the V zone come to this board in years. So the level of supervision is much different.
Thank you.
I mean, okay, I'm going to go ahead and request that somebody make a motion.
Almost. Oh, I'm sorry.
Gary Camp, I'll move that we approve.
I'll second. We approve. Jose Jimenez.
Okay. So I got a first and a second for approval of the variance. Do we have a roll call?
Sure. Ram Munoz,
Yes.
Gary Camp,
Yes.
Paul Cervantes,
Yes.
Jared Meredith,
No.
Mike Wanzer. Mike Wanzer. Okay. Ronald Brister is abstaining, and Jose Jimenez.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay. Go ahead and close up item 2. We're going to open up item number 3.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Aruba Bay Townhomes building number 2. There are a few buildings on this site. There are 3 different elevations for the site, I believe. And this is the only building that felt a little short. At permit submittal, Aruba Bay Construction presented a pre-construction elevation certificate, indicated co-compliance. It would be finished floor at 11. Upon final inspections, which were all approved at 4/26/21, it showed 10.6 at finished construction for finished floor. And it does not meet the requirement of 1 foot extra for freeboard that was adopted April 16th of 2019. It is the staff recommendation for disapproval of the variance due to the city adopted 1-inch freeboard requirement. Below you'll see a variance request application, the elevation certificates with the grades, and also we have representatives online today to discuss that.
Okay. I'm going to open it up for public comment. Does the applicant have anything to add?
Okay, sorry, I didn't unmute. Good afternoon. This is Alex Harris with the Aruba Bay Resort. I have with me Craig Kerr and Adriana Carter. These are our construction team that we have on building this property. And I hope you can see this. This is a site that's located out on Pottery Island at Aruba and Leeward. The building that we're talking about, I've circled, it's a 9-unit complex that is on Aruba Drive. When it was built, we thought, and from the contractor, and again, we're the contractor, okay, but we can do the best we can with the group that we have out there, that it was at the required elevation of 11 feet. Get ready to finish. We asked for the final elevation certificates, and we find out it's 10.6, about 4 inches low. However, this is tied in with a 72-unit project with what is across the street. As was mentioned a minute ago, this site is a little bit complicated in that it's got 3 different elevations running through it. That may be on there, but we have 8, 9, and 10, and we were working off of a benchmark that we thought we could actually be able to appropriately know the elevation on each building. Each one, we've got buildings 1, 2, 3, and 4 right now. It's our interpretation that this is the only one that has a little bit of an issue with it. So we're we've done a lot. I mean, we've built over 500 townhomes on Padre Island and Port Aransas. This is our only one in the last 15 years that did not match up with the proper elevation. We apologize. We wish it hadn't. We would certainly like to fix it if we could. Economically, it's impossible to do that, to even raise it, because if you look at on the pictures, the back deck is tied in. Those pilings are jetted in the ground 20 feet deep. and it drops off from there down to the dock on the water. So we can't just raise the building. We need a variance in that case to be able to handle this. We have all 9 units sold. We have buyers waiting to close. We have closing instructions from their lenders. And we have to have a new C of O in order to do that, because we want to give each buyer a fully C of O and not a temporary C of O to work with. So we're asking for your consideration. We have changed a policy in the future that will make a difference. From this point on, we will have our elevation engineer show up and check that site before they pour. We will get some kind of a certificate or something from them that shows what that height of that slab is before we will actually let our contractor pour it. And it'll stop this from happening in the future. I know that's what commercial contractors do, and we are going to implement that within our company. So I just asked for consideration on this one. We're ready to close it. We got buyers that are wanting to move in before the busy season to rent it. So I just would appreciate your help.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close that comment, open it up to the board.
This is Jared Murtis. This one seems pretty clean, Ram. Make a motion that we accept the variance.
I second that. This is Paul.
We have a motion on the floor. Do we have any other motions? Okay, roll call, please.
There we go. Ram Munoz,
Yes.
Gary Camp,
Yes.
Paul Cervantes,
Yes.
Jared Murtis,
Yes.
Mike Wanzer. Did you need to unmute yourself, Mike?
I'm sorry, yes. Yes, I need to unmute, and yes, I vote in favor of the variance.
Okay. Ron Brister
Yes.
and Jose Jimenez.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, we're going to close item number 3 and open up item number 4.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Alex.
Okay, last item of the day is for 502 South Clarkwood. This is a commercial site. This is asking for a variance prior to submitting for any building permits or any project submittals. Richard Valls is on the line with us representing 44 Clarkwood LLC to ask for a pre-construction variance request. The preliminary map for this site shows the circumstances have improved for the area and without a variance for the height to the finished floor. The applicant claims the project would be unable to move forward at the unless the effective BFE is allowed. If it's allowed. The effective is 45.5. The preliminary is 42.5. So they're wanting to build at the preliminary. The city stance is disapproval on the variance since we do ask for the more stringent of the area. Below you'll see application request and a newly submitted proposed plan. We do have a couple of representatives on the line for this site.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and open it up to the client for comment.
Hi, this is Lawrence Valls. Hi, Kathleen and Chairman Munoz and committee. I have with me Rick Valls as well, and I think Michael York is on the line as well. And we're asking for your consideration for a variance of the BFE requirement for this 30-acre site. It's a 27-acre project that we've been working on for over a year. We've jumped through quite a bit of hoops in zoning and working with the pipelines that are there and being in the AQ zone. So we do have some height restrictions that we're working through as well. But the project is an interesting one. It's primarily a laydown yard, but it will have a 16,000 square foot pre-engineered metal building requirement. And our request is related to the effective FEMA maps versus the preliminary FEMA maps that we understand are not yet adopted. We believe the preliminary FEMA maps are more reflective of the actual zone, the flood risk in that area. The Clarkwood Street is at about a height of, I believe, 43 feet adjacent to our property, and most of the property is about a height of 41.5 to 42 feet. The BFE from the old maps is listed at 45.5 feet, which would require us to go a foot above that to 46.5 for any of the habitable structures. And we plan to locate them close to the road. That would require basically about a 5-foot differential from what the existing grade is. And we'd be well above the street, 3 feet above the street level. And that is going to be very difficult for ingress and egress for us. We think it jeopardizes the viability of the entire project being located at that site. And we just don't think it's necessary based on even, we visited the site yesterday and the day before, and Clarkwood was, not flooding in the area adjacent to the property. The property had some water on it, but it's just that 4 or 5 foot differential. We just don't seem to understand it for a finished floor elevation there. So that we're asking for your variance there, and we're happy. We tried to include some information with the preliminary maps, but we think those preliminary maps are more reflective of the flood risk, and we're asking that you recognize those for this project. And we're happy to answer any questions, and we appreciate your consideration.
Well, and the only thing I'd add, and this is Rick Falls, is that the warehouse in question is the offices will be separate from the warehouse. That warehouse will run 40-foot Will Scott units through it for a final check that go off to job sites in the region. But the actual offices will be their own product and stacked on a flat site closer to Clarkwood. So they will be mobile.
Yeah, and just to expand on that a little bit, where Rick was going is that this is going to be a storage site for mobile minis. Those are trailer mounted units, long wheelbases, and this will be a make ready. The pre-engineered building will be a make ready site for those, and having to transition that much of a difference in height will create some challenges for those modular units, to the point that it'll likely jeopardize the viability of the project at this location.
And thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, guys.
Ram, this is Michael York. I'm the engineer representing the client, and I think they did a great job explaining the situation. The only thing I'd really like to add is, it's my understanding that the reasoning behind the ordinance that was adopted by the city requiring the more stringent of the two was really more for cases like you just had, where the BFE gets worse. So from effective to the future or the preliminary, it gets worse. And the city wanted to make sure that people were building to what was going to be in the future, which would be worse. In this case, this is the biggest change I've ever seen in a 3-foot difference, roughly 3 feet, and it gets better. And so it doesn't seem to make sense to make them build, 3 feet higher, and then in a few years, whenever these maps, finally get adopted, they're way up out of the ground, way higher than they need to be. And the only other thing is obviously those preliminary maps are not adopted, but everything that I've looked into, it does not appear that this area is in question. So there's a few areas that are still under review because of appeals, and that some of those areas are in Corpus, but this area was not the map didn't change based on the preliminary and the appeal. So it appears this is going to stay the same. It's just some other areas that are holding up the adoption of those maps. So that's why we're asking to be able to build to the future or preliminary BFE. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Ram, this is Jared Murders. Can I ask Michael York a question?
Yeah, you can ask him.
Michael, looking at the site, so this property is actually next to the international airport, and the two adjacent sites to this are LNF Distributors, which is fairly new, U.S. Border Patrol and Protection, and Baker Hughes, which are all fairly new in the sense that they hadn't been there that long. Okay, so those structures that are all right next to this facility, how does that work? As far as what are their elevations, how did they make it work? And I know if you look at the site maps that it appears that water drains from LNF Distributors right through this property by looking at the maps, just kind of looking at the way things seem to move. And all the water seems to flow to the OSO. That's the water source kind of in this area here. So do we know what the elevations are of the other structures adjacent to this site? Is this site just lower than the other ones just because of where it's located?
Unfortunately, I don't have that information, so I don't know. The only thing we've got is the map you can see on the screen. There's survey of that, so we've got the elevations of this site. I mean, that bleeds over a few feet into the adjacent properties, but we don't have the elevations of LNF or of the Border Patrol site. But, in this type of situation, we lean on FEMA, and they show that the waters, you're right, the waters are going to drain through the existing ditches that are there, which this property is surrounded by. There's a ditch on the north side, a smaller one, which dumps into the bigger ditch, which is on the east side. And all of that drainage goes down that ditchway, and so we're relying on FEMA, and it shows that the situation has improved substantially, actually. But I don't know what the elevation is of those existing buildings over there.
Okay.
And just to add to a clarification there, what you're seeing running through there is a pipeline, not a drainage ditch. The drainage ditches are not part of the property. They're on the north and east side.
Got you. That's why I asked, because I'm unfamiliar with the site, and I guess where I was going with it is that if we have LNF Distributors and we have U.S. Border Patrol and Customs and Baker Hughes right next to it, and they're all at the same elevation, I think it would have bearing upon the merit of y'all basically asking us to lower a requirement. If all the structures around it are not, and that we're not on the we're not up against the coastline here, we're inland. And so I just in my mind think that information would be prudent to the appeal to look at the structures around it, but just to ask to reduce it, it would give more strength to the request.
I understand what you're saying. This is Michael York. One thing I think is worth throwing in here is that, where these other structures are built to, there's nothing we can do about that. But when you're saying reduce it to reduce it, I'd like to point out, one, we're not asking just to arbitrarily reduce anything. We're just asking to follow the future maps, which will be adopted, or preliminary maps, which will be adopted at some point in the future. And as far as we know, that will be the requirement. So we just want to follow that instead of follow the one, the older maps where the flooding situation was worse in this area. But something that I wanted to point out that we run into when you have to bring fill onto a site, the amount of fill makes a difference. So it's, think of a big bowl of water, and if you're adding a bunch of dirt into it, you're displacing that water. You're making it, the amount it can hold less. So if this were granted and the site doesn't have to be raised an additional 3 feet, that's a lot less fill being brought into this special flood hazard area.
Okay, thank you, Mike. But off the topic here, why wouldn't you just apply for a Clomar to adjust the elevation?
This is where we were directed. I called to ask if we could. It didn't seem necessary to do a clomer when the only thing that's causing an issue here is a local city ordinance and not a FEMA matter. And so.
Well, FEMA's recommendation, by the way, on FEMA's website, they do recommend officially that jurisdictions have a 1 foot freeboard. I mean, that is a official recommendation by FEMA and I've provided that information in past board meetings. So they do want us to try to do that. It's not just a local thing.
Understood. And we're
Okay.
planning to follow the freeboard. We're just asking to follow the freeboard based on the preliminary FEMA maps and not the effective.
Okay.
Well, you're not really asking to follow it. You're asking for something that doesn't exist now. I'd like to ask a question, if I could, about the 32 feet for the Navy fly zone. Do I understand it right that this property is going to be 10 to 12 and a half feet or so higher than what they approve?
No, this is Lawrence Falls. No, we will be in compliance with it's our intent to comply with the AQ zone and what they've allowed for a height restriction. Having said that, we're adding at a sort of an average elevation of 42 feet for the property and having to go to 46 and a half on that finished on the PEM building. We won't go above the 35 foot or the 35 foot, whatever the restriction is.
Here's where I get my question. It looks like Mr. Arval's put this here. Additionally, because the proposed project is in the Navy AICU zone, the FFA has only authorized an overall height of 32 foot from the existing grade. What does that mean? Because the way I read that, it means that even if we approve what you want, the building's going to be 10 and a half or 12 feet higher than what the FFA approves. Are y'all looking to get a waiver on that from the FFA?
No, the waiver has already been granted by the FFA. That's one of the things we went through with the zoning process. The height of the building will certainly be impacted by how much fill we're going to have to bring in and what base flood elevation we're going to have to recognize here. But we will not exceed, we won't be able to exceed the granted height restriction that was given by the Navy. So we're going to have to work underneath that. But no, we're not talking about a 40-foot building. I think maybe.
I understand. What did the Navy give you?
I believe it was 32 or 35 feet.
We asked for a 32 foot because we wanted a 30 foot building. I mean, if we have to go with the existing maps, then we're going to have to ask the Navy for a variance there, the FAA and explain our situation. They have already granted the 32 foot because that's what we asked for. And it's kind of interesting going back to Mr. Murtis's question. Clarkwood is basically the city and AQ zone on borderline. So the warehouses that he mentioned concerning Customs and Border Protection and Baker Hughes are not within that zone. And they're also in the county. They're outside the city. There is a retention pond across from this property in Clarkwood for those two properties. And they drain along the north side of this property. Just to answer his question with regards to L&F drains into, it looks like from when we're out there yesterday, drains into the Oso ditch, but the Oso ditch is in between both of those properties. I hope that helps answer both those questions.
It does. And so, Ram, this is Jared Murtis. What is your experience? I'm not real experienced with how FEMA does their proposed maps and how they change. But being on many boards for many years, we've had circumstances where like on mechanical board or electrical board where a future code is going to be adopted and the requirement is different. And we've had someone come to the board before saying, hey, you know, the current requirement is a little more stringent. The future requirement is less than or less stringent because of circumstances. And that's kind of what Mr. York is saying, is that, you know, FEMA is not seeing this area as strictly as it had before with the proposed map. So given that, and given the track record in the past, I mean, that is a good argument, because but the question is that in the code world, I knew that code was going to be that way. It wasn't going to change. It was a code that's been approved but not adopted, so it wasn't going to be modified. So what is the likelihood of, because I'm very ignorant to how FEMA does map construction and how they approve it, and I know it takes a long time, all that stuff, but what's the likelihood of FEMA changing a preliminary map in this area? Does anybody know how that would work, if it would at all?
I mean, it's highly unlikely they're going to change it. There would have to be some storm event that required them to come out here and reinvestigate and redo the study. But on stuff like this, we, in the past, when we've had multiple, you know, building code issues where we're going to go to the next one, we put the liability on the owner at that point. That if it never gets adopted, it never gets that they don't get a CFO. So there's a little bit of, you know, shifting of liability that does occur here.
Well, you know, from reading FEMA requirements, which is basically what FEMA is trying to do, is, and at the end of the day, is so people don't get hurt, but also so they don't have to pay. They want to make sure that tax dollars are not just burnt. So if there's, you know, someone occupies this facility and it, you know, is damaged and they want to go to FEMA for damages, that's kind of what FEMA's main driver has been, insurance costs, other than safety and public. So, you know, given this facility, it's mostly storage units and no one's living here. The structures are all metal buildings. You know, I don't really know what damage would occur and if that's even applicable, because that's what FEMA is concerned about mostly. So,
right. Like I said earlier, I mean, it's highly unlikely it's going to change. We'd have to have some type of storm event that they'd have to come here and do some post indicator markers to see the flood. But we don't know when they're going to get adopted. They've been telling us they've been going to get adopted for, I don't know.
So if I could ask you a question, is the preliminary map that Mr. Valls is talking about that could be adopted, am I hearing you say it may never be adopted?
I mean, I wouldn't say never. It's going to eventually
Well,
be. But
okay, I don't mean literally never, but there's no guarantee that it will ever be adopted or even looked at, is there?
there's a chance. I mean, like these maps alone have been around since what, 2015 already, and that's because we had review maps before that. So I can never. I don't even.
I'm not saying never. I'm just saying there's a chance that they may, the preliminary map that they want us to base this on may never come to fruition.
You're correct.
Okay.
So usually, as a go ahead.
Oh, sorry. This is Michael York. Just for what it's worth, I've always understood from being in meetings where the FEMA officials discuss these maps that it's not a question of if, but when. And in the majority of the rest of the country, these preliminary maps have been adopted. But it's my understanding the only reason that our map in Nueces County has not been adopted is because of one or a handful of areas that have been appealed. So, for example, the city of Corpus may appeal a certain area and say, hey, we don't think that's right. They conduct a study and submit a bunch of data, but those engineering flood studies take time, and then FEMA has to go back and forth and review it. So I know you say there's a chance. Sure, there's a chance. I guess this could drag on for a long time, but I think it's pretty well understood in the engineering community that these will be adopted at some point. It's just how long will it take for them to hash out these last few little areas?
I mean, my question is going to be towards our floodplain manager. So in the past, we've always had them meet the most stringent requirement. And even on one of the projects we worked on, we ended up going with a more stringent requirement, even though it was a delta of 3 feet. What does it do for our FEMA program here in town?
I'm sorry, you cut out on my end. Are you asking what does requiring the more stringent one do for us on our end?
No, so we know typically it's always the most stringent one. Even one of my projects, we went more stringent, even though it's a delta of 3 feet. If we go down, and that's actually what's written in our flood code, ordinance, right? The most stringent of either the effective or preliminary. What would it do to the program if we accepted one that was in the preliminary version that was below the stringent requirement?
So, from my understanding, from asking and chatting with FEMA the past couple of weeks, we would put together all the information like we have today for the board. We put it to you guys. We have adopted the preliminary. So as far as we're concerned, preliminary is good for construction purposes. It is also the 1 foot. If there is some reason where the appeal states, as today we approved these 4, then it wouldn't hurt us CRS or NFPI wise. As long as it did go to a board, it was considered, you did look at everything and all of that good stuff. So if we approve this one, it doesn't go against us, from my understanding from FEMA, because it was considered for all of these other factors.
Okay. So, and this appeal is for adjusting the floodplain elevation, not the freeboard.
It's adjusting the freeboard requirement for these because these were just the 1 foot difference. They're above the base flood elevation requirement for the basic FEMA. All of these are.
So we're not freeboard. So this appeal is to adjust the floodplain elevation.
Yes, for these, yes.
Okay, not the freeboard.
Not the freeboard. Yes.
Ram, this is Michael York. Just to clarify, we want to be able to follow the preliminary maps, and I make that point because it's not just a matter of the base flood elevation, but the preliminary maps have actually removed the majority of this site from the special flood hazard area.
Correct. I understand. They put you in an X.
Right.
So,
yeah, I just wanted to point that out.
Right. No, we understand.
And also, I just want to throw it out there. Our appeal period time is over from all of my discussions with FEMA. So all of the appeals have been submitted. The preliminary maps will be adopted, hopefully, cross our fingers, sooner than later. But they are going through the last ones that they had. The only firm panels that may change are the ones that will be slightly adjusted because of those appeals that were submitted and that they were still working on, the leftover ones. But these will be adopted.
Right. Okay. So we've concurred with all your information so far that all they're requesting for is for them to be able to follow the preliminary map for that elevation. Freeboard stays as a 1 foot requirement. Okay. Do we have a motion? Yes, sir.
Ram, can you remind me what staff recommendation is? Because I had forgotten that. This has been a long conversation.
Well, they always hit deny.
Say what again?
Staff always denies.
Oh.
So that's another thing. Staff automatically has to disapprove any request for variances.
Okay.
Wait. Say, I'd like to ask, where do you get that information from? Where is that written? That staff has to decline every time.
That's pretty much the way it's been for the last.
Okay, but it's not really the rules. It's the practice, but it's not really in the rules. It's customary, but it's not a rule. It's fairly straightforward question there.
So
correct.
Yes.
Practice.
Okay. Yes.
But
I guess what I was trying to say is staff denies but doesn't have like a extra opinion on the matter is what I'm saying.
They typically reserve. Yeah.
All right. I'm done. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Do we have a motion on the floor?
A motion to approve, Jose Jimenez.
I second.
Can we get roll call, please?
Yeah, but who was that second?
Ron Brister.
Thank you. Ram Munoz,
Yes.
Gary Camp,
Approve, yes.
Paul Cervantes,
Yes.
Jared Murtis,
Yes.
Mike Wanzer,
No.
Ron Brister,
Yes.
and Jose Jimenez.
Yes.
Motion passes to approve.
Great.
Thank you for your consideration and hearing us out. We're hoping to bring
Thank
this
you,
to
everyone.
fruition.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I'm gonna close item number 4. And
I'm going to
open
bring up the agenda once more. Give me a moment.
Okay. So we're closing item number 5, and we're gonna open up item number 6, deputy building official report.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Luke Fry, Deputy Building Official. We have just a couple items that we'd like to highlight. Number one, the technical review committees for the 2021 code adoption start next month. We have a schedule that we'll be sending out for meeting times and book pickup for anyone who is already registered on those committees. Secondly, we have 2 IBs, informational bulletins, that will be effective June 1st. That is IB 8 for drainage and IB 10 for engineered wood products. Do we have any questions on those items?
In the future, can you please provide those in the packet as part of distribution material? That way the board can review them.
Sure.
So I've read them. Do we have any comments from the board?
Mr. Fry, you said that you were going to email that information to us?
Yes, I can email it to you.
Thank you.
Well, let's move on.
Luke Fry's item. So if he's got another item to present, he'll present it to us.
No, I'm good to go. That's it.
Okay.
No, that's all that I have today. But we are open. If you have questions, please ask.
Oh,
So-
well, tell us all about Building Safety Month.
What would you like to know, Mike? You've been around a long time.
Just kidding.
Yes, it is Building Safety Month, and we're excited about that. As I'm sure you can tell.
Yes, me too.
So we had requested on fallback that we be presenting information regarding enforcement of journeyman and I guess apprentice for electrical and what's going on out there in the public. Do you remember that conversation we had a while back?
Are we on future agenda items? Is that what is the next item that we're on?
It would have been a future agenda item back in December or January, so it should have been on the report already.
What he's talking about is we had a discussion about the electrician on the board. He didn't, well, and I can't speak for him. He's here, I think, but that the enforcement was not right. There weren't enough journeymen and helpers, and it seemed like that the locals were getting checked on it, but some of the big companies coming in from out of town or, out of state, they kind of getting a pass on it. And I believe Mr. Fry was gonna look into that and tell us about it. No?
Yeah, it's been determined that that's a TDLR issue, that TDLR enforces that.
So the city doesn't go out there and inspect compliance to the building code?
No, that's not what I said.
Mike, this is Paul Cervantes, but in order to get to TDR, doesn't the local jurisdiction have to bring it first? Oh, are you talking to Mike Wanzer? No, Mike Fry. I'm sorry. Oh yeah,
Luke Fry.
I'm sorry, Luke Fry. Luke. Yes, in order for the state to step in, the local jurisdiction has to bring it to their attention because the state will not come here unless they're asked to be here. Bingo. In the mechanical, you know, TDLR, the laws of for mechanical contracting, air conditioning contractor's license, the city has a duty to report any violations to the state. That it's not they should, they absolutely have a duty to do that. And I know they don't, and that I'm not saying, I'm just saying, isn't it similar with the electrical? Yes, sir. TDLR is just not going to come in and take action in the municipality without their invitation. That is correct. Our local authority having jurisdiction has to do their job in order for the state to come in. That's exactly right. They not only that, they have a duty to do it.
Okay, gentlemen, you're absolutely correct, and we will put this on the agenda as future agenda items and address it at our next meeting, which I think is next month.
Okay, well, you make sure it gets on it because it never got on it last time, so that's why we're here talking about it this time.
Right, we'll make sure and we will respond accordingly.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
We did talk about it. It's just that they're looking for a different response. So.
Yes.
But yeah, we'll look into that. Your response or what you're desiring is different from what my response was. We will look into it further. But again, the enforcement of these contractors really is at the TDLR level. But how we get there, I understand what you're saying. But yes, we'll speak with legal and we'll get back to you on it.
Just FYI, guys, I'm a former inspector in your department, and we had the jurisdiction years ago. So unless something's changed between now and then, please bring it to. Well, I think what changed is, and I'm going to throw this out there, and I don't believe I'm wrong, but Joe Elliott, when he was chief building inspector, he actually had a badge and had enforcement capabilities, where now the inspectors don't. That is correct. Okay.
That is true. Yeah.
Well, and Mr. Fry, I'd like to ask you that question, if I might, on this. Why don't we have an inspector with the enforcement ability? I mean, why isn't that? Why don't we have a designated inspector that has that capability, where there's a plumbing, mechanical, whatever inspector he is?
So, and I'm sorry, sir, this is Al Raymond. When you say enforcement ability, what are you referring to? Because we do enforce the code.
He actually had a badge.
I know, but when you say enforcement, what do you mean exactly by enforcement? Did he write citations?
Yes, he could issue a citation. And what I mean is that the electrical inspector could go out to the job. He could say, and keep in mind, I don't know the formula for the journeyman or apprentice or whatever they call them, because we don't do that in air conditioning. We don't have apprenticeships or journeymans. But what I'm saying is the local inspector, he can go out and he can say, okay, you've got five apprentices and one journeyman or one master, and you need 2 masters for 5 apprentices. You don't have them. Where are they? Get them here or cite them. Does that make sense? Yes, the FYI, guys, the ratio is 3 to 1. 3 helpers for 1 journeyman and 6 journeymans for 1 master.
I understand your what you're saying, and I'll certainly look into that. Right now, as it stands today, 2021, our inspectors whether they're building, plumbing, mechanical, electrical, do not have that authority, right, to write citations. But give me a minute. We'll research and get with Buck, and we'll report back at the next meeting.
Well, and Mr. Fry, I'm not saying that I'm not being critical because we don't, but I think it's something that we should have, and that would be it'd be a nice tool in your bag to have.
Mike.
The ability for the inspector to cite.
Right. Mike, this is Jared Murtis, and I know I don't want to belabor this at all, but I was on the electrical board when our local licensing program was abolished, and the city had local licensing. The licensing requirement for electrical contractors was not as stringent as the state, and there were a few people that were licensed, older individuals. They were given a grace period, and I think it's about 8 years now. If the city will know, it's been like 8 or 9 years since we've abolished the local electrical licensing. And so we're basically going off of the state requirement. And I know that that's part of the transitional problem is what we've historically done and what things now through the state is a little bit different. I think filing complaints is you go on TDLR website and you file complaints. I think that the city can file complaints or concerned people can. The issue would be on a job site is that concerned citizens aren't there. You don't have people on a job site looking at that. So I think what we're asking of the city is just for help, that if we've got inspectors that are seeing things to be able to communicate with the state in some way, I think would help solve the problem. I think is what we're trying to do, right?
I certainly don't want to create a problem, but right. It seems like
right. So
for the electricians or plumbers, it's just a question of fairness.
Right. Well, I'm just going back because I was on the board at the time and the building official at the time and going through all of the nuances of having a local licensing requirement and having the authority of licensing people, managing the process and whatnot. In the state, the city felt it was responsible to follow state requirements, but the state doesn't have local representation. So, I think the question to the city would be is that given in that we don't have people from the state, what can we do? Either outreach, telling local contractor people that you need to get involved and file complaints against licensed individuals with state proper protocol, and would the city be able to provide some direction to inspectors and assist with that? I think is what we're trying to do here without making this overly complicated. If we're not finding compliance, it's how do we work with the state and how do we let everybody know how to help solve the problem is how I'm seeing this.
Well, this is Paul Cervantes. Jared, to piggyback what you said, I was on the board right before it got dismantled and it became one board. We had special permission to have special meetings. The inspectors were doing their job. The city was saying that certified letters. From what I remember, the state came in. They told us what to do. We brought in, I think, 5 or 6 master electricians. One of them had their license revoked, and we're going to have special meetings. But then right before we kept going to the next meeting, the city decided to dissolve the board and combine it into one.
So you're right. All that got brought up last time is the reason why we wanted, as part of the building report here, how do we get that implemented again? So this goes back to our 2 previous requests.
Yes, sir.
Being the 3rd time we requested.
Thank you, Ram.
Thank you, Ram.
Okay, Ram and the board, as we said, we will certainly put this on the agenda for our next meeting, whether that's in June or 3 months from now, and we'll do our due diligence and report back to you.
Okay. So do we have a meeting next month?
Yes, we do.
Okay, good. Perfect.
This is Mike Wander. I'd like to ask one other question concerning, I guess they're the subcommittees for the code adoption. You mentioned if you haven't, something like if you're not already registered or signed up. I haven't registered or signed up, but I haven't really seen how to do that. Am I just dumb and I don't get it, or what? I mean, I don't want to get left out is what I'm saying. And if I need to sign up, I haven't heard from anybody on how to do that.
Well, this is Al Raymond. We serve for the last 2 or 3 months. We've pushed this announcement for volunteers to participate on the committees to every venue I think we know of: social media, the paper, our website, our meetings. I think at this meeting, the council meetings. So we put it out there. It'd be very difficult not to have noticed it. And so right now the teams have been established. Can you still join? Send us a request of what you're interested in, and we will consider it.
Mr. Raymond, it was my understanding from last meeting that we discussed this. It was going to be coming up, and if we're on the board, we were automatically going to get put on some committee or subcommittee.
No, that's well, it wasn't communicated through us that way. It was strictly volunteer. But if you want to be on any specific committee, let us know, and we'll give it consideration.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, guys. I'm going to close out the building official report. And I'm going to open up future agenda items. But I think we've already included that already. So does anybody have any future agenda items?
Yes, sir. This is Jared Murtis. So we need to talk about Clint Tucker Homes. We've discussed in the past that the purpose of the City of Corpus Christi contractor registration requirement is the purpose of disciplinary action. And because we are not a licensing, the city does not license. So it basically says you have to be registered to perform work within the city limits. And just similar to a plumbing contractor that we've had that had repeat issues where they were not doing their work well, and the board basically said, hey, we're going to revoke your registration. So I was under the impression, because I'm not a general contractor, that the city already had a registration requirement for general contractors, and that was the avenue. And if we have, do we use that mechanism to discuss Client Tucker Homes or something else? And I'm just looking for the future item is staff to provide some recommendations on what do we do when we have a general that is or anyone for that matter has like repeat offenses, and I think that's the request.
This is Al Raymond again. Unlike the plumbing contractors, the electrical contractors, and the mechanical contractors who get a state license, and there's a hole there that you could say because they have an allegiance to align themselves with the state requirements. A general contractor can be anyone, and the City of Corpus Christi does not have a registration program to say, Mr. Contractor, we need you to be licensed, we need you to be competent, we need you to be bonded and insured. We don't have that program now. Over the last, I want to say maybe 8 months, I've met on site 3 homeowners who were in dire straits because some guy posing as a contractor has taken advantage of them, and the last one was on TV, and I can't remember the name of the troubleshooter who was doing the story. However, I did say to the troubleshooter, this year, we being Development Services is going to once again attempt to try to establish a contractor registration program that's going to set in place standards that if you want to hang out a shingle, in Corpus Christi and do business as a general contractor, you've got to be tested. You got to show that you have competency at whatever it is you're going to do, residential or commercial. You need to have insurance so that that gives the buyer of your services some comfort that, oh yeah, this guy's not just fly by night. However, I've only been in this city a year and 6 months, and you know as well as I do that almost every single person on the other side of the table is going to just have a total problem with that. So if that is something that this board wants to support, and I thank you, and I would welcome your support. Then I need you to be as vocal and out there because of these issues we just had here in the last hour and a half, right? Because it's very important.
Right. We have been equally vocal about this long before you. And you made the statement and haven't been here that long. Well, we've been here a long time. And this issue has been an issue a long time. And what we heard today from a builder is that they're relying on a sub to do things because they're probably not qualified to do that job. And so it is an awkward position. And as we've discussed through years before you, okay, the issue is at the state level. It's not at the local level. The issue is at the state. The state should require licensing for generals. And I understand that it's very complex for the city to be more stringent than the state of Texas. And it's a hard place to be in. All we're saying is that the lack of it is posing a problem. And if you have someone unqualified around town doing all kinds of things, it basically without doing something, then we're doing nothing. And so in my opinion, and what we're asking for a future agenda item is for staff to figure out a way of dealing with it and make some recommendations. How do we strengthen it from a permitting perspective? If somebody's in a for-profit business to build a structure and then don't do it and come to the board for variance requests because they're unqualified to do the work, and it just keeps happening over and over and over again, it's kind of the definition of insanity. So, it has been going on for a while. So we're just respectfully asking this question that we've asked for many, many, many years. And I understand it's a hard one. What can we do to make progress? That's all we're trying to do.
I'm sorry, Jared, I didn't mean to step over you. Go ahead.
Oh, and in the past, the insurance requirement was a very the city did not think we could require that because it was in excess of state requirements, bonding and whatnot. But if the city did require any individual to be registered with the city of Corpus Christi for whatever they do, with no proof and no insurance of their competency, but they have to be registered like everyone else. And because the city requires electricians to be registered and plumbers to be registered and mechanical people to be registered, HVAC contractors to be registered and licensed both. So it's really like its own little thing. And what we were working on with previous staff and management was creating a program for general construction registration. And I don't know where that ever went. And it's just, that's where we were going before this team is here. And so anything that y'all feel would work and would improve the situation, I think that's what we're asking. I don't know how to solve that problem. That's why we're asking it. And we want y'all to put your heads together and find some way that we would sell to the public and anyone who's concerned of why we need to have a mechanism for something like this. So,
well, hey, Jared, I can tell you one reason why. It's just, remember the shower pan fiasco?
Yes.
And we talked about it then, and Gene was going to look into it and do something, but he's gone. Nothing got done.
Right.
And there were dozens and dozens of people that were put out. Why in the world the city would allow a tile man to do a shower pan when it's the plumber's responsibility? Still, they do it to this day. I don't understand why they're allowed to do that.
Yeah.
And
it's definitely at the state level. And so the question is that is there anything we can do at the local level that just provides a little bit more of the discouragement for someone to basically just not follow city requirements and code requirements, ordinances and whatnot, and just ask for forgiveness because they don't know any better, and to continue to do that. There should be a mechanism to stop that from happening.
Yeah, this is Gary Camp. One thing, if I'm correct, I believe the city of Portland, unless you're registered, you can't pull a permit as a GC over there.
And that's what we're talking about here. And Gene was working on that. That's the conclusion that we came to. And
Yeah,
and
with a shower pan.
and yes, and we actually even talked about the fee because the city was going to require the registration to have no fee because everyone was going to complain that they had $100 fee. So the city was considering having a registration program free of charge, but it didn't change the fact that without being registered, you can't pull a permit. And
I think home builders should have to post a bond for every home they build for a given period of time that the homeowner can go against. They should at least be bonded per home.
Mike, and I
I'd like to
agree
ask
with you,
a-
but at
I'd
a
like to
state
ask Mr.
level, we can't fight that. We've been over this so many times that because the state doesn't require it, the backlash that we will get, we have to make improvements where we can. We have to make
I
the
understand, but
system better.
and not to be argumentative, but the way I understand, we're a home rule city. We can do anything we want.
Yes, we can.
Chairman,
Yeah.
if I
We can. So,
certainly,
thank you,
But
guys.
real quick, I'd like to ask Mr. Fry a question. What do they do, or Mr. Raymond, what do they do in Houston for home building?
And this is, gentlemen, we will certainly have a robust discussion next month because this will obviously be on the agenda as well. I understand your direction and we're still in touch with Gene and he engages very often, or I should say we engage him. So this also will be on the agenda. We'll do our due diligence and report back to you. I understand exactly where we need to go and we'll do some benchmarking around our area and maybe a little outside and report back and kind of set path for next steps to move forward.
Thank you.
Okay, but my question is, what do they do in Houston?
I honestly don't remember, but we'll do some benchmarking and find out.
So this is how we ask it, Mike, if you want that answer. As part
Okay.
of when you guys go ahead and, give us the information, can you please
Yes.
inform us what other jurisdictions like San Antonio and Houston do?
We'll do some benchmarking. Yes, sir.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close future agenda items.
Hey, I have one thing, Ram, before you close it, please.
Okay, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah, this Gary Camp, and again, we've raised this numerous times, this form survey and the need for it. And we had 3 great examples today of why we need it. And I want it back on the agenda, guys. We've got to address it. These home builders are against it because it might cost them a couple of $100 extra bucks that they're going to pass on to this homeowner anyway. And of course, I'm a commercial contractor, but I see these residential guys doing this all the time. We've got to stop it.
Yes, sir. I agree, Gary. Thank you.
I agree, Gary.
So this would be our I think our third request on this one. How do we make it a requirement for a residential application for this?
So just so that you'll know, and not that I'm trying to over discuss or beat a dead horse, but Information Bulletin 8 specifically requires, a pre and post survey for specific properties, but not residential, I should say specific residential and commercial properties, but not residential properties, widespread, right? Because of course, in this community, as the gentleman said, I've only been here a year and a half, but this community pushes back on any kind of new regulations on what they've already been doing. So we worked, as you know, Ram, to get Information Bulletin 8 where it is, so that there's a requirement for specific properties in specific areas for pre and post surveys. If we want to go beyond that to make it a requirement, that's fine. But however, these 3 cases that were before us today, in essence, that's just poor planning with a contractor. If you're in a certain area, you should check the form before you pour the concrete. Who wouldn't do that? But, it's just learning after the fact, so to speak.
Well, it's a little bit different though when you have a registered surveyor or somebody that's truly qualified to check that form and put their license on the line. I think it kind of give it a little more weight, if you know what I mean.
You know what?
I do.
I'd like to comment on that but they're not really putting their license on the line. There's really nothing on the line. There's no downside for them not getting it right. None at all. Except maybe a little egg on the face with their customer. But other than that, there's no professional responsibility.
Al, do you want to put go ahead and we'll move forward with the form survey for the next meeting?
Yes, we want to go ahead and get that on there. And as you told us earlier, we've only done about 250 homes in a floodplain area, which is really the only locations we're going to require it, not everywhere else. So, gotcha.
Well,
right.
I find it ironic that we're gonna, out of 254 permits in the floodplain, only 3 of them got it wrong.
Right.
It's just, and one of them is the same guy twice.
Well, that's why you guys want the contractors registered to prevent that from happening. So, it's a
Well,
good thing.
I doubt that'll happen, but anyway, we'll go from there.
Thank you, Mike. I'm going to go ahead and those future agenda items. And do I have a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion, we adjourn.
A second.
Second.
Right. Aye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, thank you.